Hi, Megan. Welcome to Belgium. Welcome to Antwerp. Megan, you're the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. And the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, they are now with more than 100,000 members. Can you tell a little bit more about the DSA and yourself?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually, I think I looked a couple days ago and we're at 106,000 members. So it's very exciting. DSA has existed since the early 80s. It was a merger of two different New Left organizations and has grown significantly since the 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential race. Most of our growth has been in that era. It was about 5,000 people in 2015, and so obviously we're about 100,000 more than that, including me. I joined in 2018, so like many people, saw Trump's election as a travesty, his first election, and wanted to get involved in something. Tried some different things, finally landed in a DSA meeting upon the invitation of a musician friend, and never left.
Never left. Okay, the story.
They can't get rid of me even when they try.
No, they're glad to have you. But here in Europe, some people, when there has been talking about the United States, people think about imperialism, capitalism, and Donald Trump, but they don't think about socialism. Mm-hmm. And then you have this socialist organization, the Democratic Socialists of America, 100,000 members now. What's the thing with socialism in the US?
Yeah, I mean, capitalism's not working for most people. It's working for a few people, for a few billionaires, and for the rest of us, it's going pretty badly. Wages are going down, prices are going up. We're seeing our schools crumble, our roads crumble, job opportunities disappearing. People my age, I'm 42, people my age are still carrying student debt. It's very common.
What does it mean, carrying student debt? Because we don't have it, this system.
You don't have student debt. I forgot. I forget sometimes that we're such a special place. We have to pay for university, and it is often very expensive. There are a series of loans that are often guaranteed by the federal government. So you take out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of loans when you're 17, 18, 19 years old, and then get to pay them off a little bit at a time for the rest of your life. And often the interest is so high, or it ends up being so high that when you're paying every month, the number's not actually going down. So I know so many people who pay a couple $100s a month and the top line stays the same. It's one of many travesties of freedom.
Yeah, and there is in this freedom society among young people, a lot of people who are interesting about socialism. There's a new generation, Gen Z, that's open for other ideas. Why especially young people now are involved in all these new movements?
It's important always to note that American socialism, there was a huge socialist surge in the early part of the last century, and it was eventually quashed largely by our government, but by capital, which our government and capital is same thing. But, we don't learn about that part of our socialist history. We talk about DSA. It's the biggest socialist party in 100 years, but it's not the biggest socialist party in the U.S. ever. There was a bigger version, the Socialist Party USA under Eugene Debs, that was even bigger. So the move to erase socialism from our consciousness was deliberate. It was a choice. But this younger generation of people who grew up under the sort of post-Reagan era worst of capitalism, just free market with very little regulation, have never really seen a moment of hope for a better world in their lives. We see people, it makes me feel very old, but people born after 9/11 who are adults now, and they have never seen a world without aggressive war from the United States, and they don't see it working for them. And so they are looking for alternatives. And some of the alternatives being offered are really bad. But socialism is a really beautiful alternative where we get to build the world we want to live in together. And I think that's quite appealing to a lot of people.
I was in December last year. I was in New York to present the American version of my book. And it was just before Trump was in office for his second term. And I had expected to meet with people that were a little bit depressed, etc. But we were there, and there was a vibrant culture. There was a vibrant counter-power culture, young people, trade union activists, and there was a dynamic. So, of course, people were angry with Trump, with the second term of Trump, but there was much more resistance than I could have imagined. So it was kind of dynamic to me. Is it only New York this kind of atmosphere, or is broader in more cities?
Yeah, not at all just in New York. We see people really building this, like you said, a vibrant culture of socialism, even in places that you wouldn't expect it at all. One of our fastest growing chapters last year was Birmingham, Alabama, which is a deep South state. It's I think the city itself, like most cities, is probably leans Democratic, but it's not exactly a hotbed for socialist organizing, but they're making it one. And, that alternative really is important because the Democrats have not provided really an alternative.
And then there is this huge movement, No Kings protest. It was last year already, very big, and I think in March now, some people said to me, 8 million people on the street, 3,000 manifestations everywhere in the U.S. It sounds big. Is it big in the social history of the U.S., this kind of mobilization?
Yeah, so we do in the U.S. like to get out in the street. That is definitely a great American tradition. We like to march. I mean, there are, of course, many sort of famous marches in history. The March on Washington that Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech at. There have been various big marches over the years. But recently, the marches have become organized in a way that they haven't been since I think probably the 1960s, 1970s Vietnam War movement, where we've really been able to coordinate messaging across cities, make sure that there are several different organizations involved. We're one of them, but there are a bunch of other left and progressive and trade unionist organizations all working together, and it's really exciting. It's people are very creative with the way that they protest. It's a really good way to see your neighbors and be active, and also find your way to an organization, because the goal of it all is to move people into the act of organizing and to join something, because it's not enough to just come in the streets once in a while. You have to be doing that movement and that organizing in between actions.
And if you would describe the main actors of this movement, because like you said, US for Belgian listeners, it's a big country.
Yep.
I don't know how many time zones you have in the US, different.
We have 4 in the continental US, and then there's an Alaska. I don't know if Alaska has 1 or 2. I think it might have 2 because some of the islands.
Okay,
and
a
then
lot
Hawaii
of time zones, so
yeah.
not easy to organize all these kind of time zones. But still, one day, one protest, 8 million people at the same day. Who are the main organizing actors? Is it trade unions, parties, movement, churches? How would you describe the organizational forces behind this protest?
Yeah, so it's all of the above. So there are some membership organizations like us, like the Sunrise Movement, which is an ecological organization. There are some trade union members. I believe the American Federation of Teachers was one. There are like social movement type organizations, Movement for Black Lives, and then who am I forgetting? I mean, there are so many. The ACLU was involved with the American Civil Liberties Union, which is an organization that it's a constitutional rights organization. They do a lot of legal work supporting people's right to protest and right to do all sorts of things. Really, just a broad the left, certainly some liberals, and organizations throughout the trade union movement.
From a distant scene, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, when Bernie Sanders started with this movement, was more quarrel or maybe more situations where there was a division, and now sometimes it looks like Trump is unifying everyone against him. There is a unifying factor in Trump, Megan. Is it correct?
Yes, it is correct. It can be helpful sometimes to have a villain in your superhero story, but it's important to remember also, and we really try to make sure it's very clear that there is a class character to this, that making Trump go away doesn't magically make the Trump movement go away, that this is all part of a greater capitalist consolidation of force. Obviously, that's some heavy stuff, and we try to meet people where they are, and where they're coming from politically. But, I mean, Trump's so flamboyantly evil. He is evil in a very loud way that makes him quite easy. And some of the people he's surrounded himself with, I know I don't know if he and Elon Musk are talking this week, but Elon Musk is another sort of just cartoon character supervillain. So that does make it easy in some ways.
I spoke with Nick Allen, that's a union organizer from CU, and he told me that on the ICE troops, so the Frontex troops of the United States chasing so-called illegal persons, when they get in Minneapolis, there was totally a different story than before, because people of Minneapolis were prepared. And he said to me, okay, there was a turning point in the resistance. What happened in Minneapolis was important. Do you agree with this? And can you maybe a little bit elaborate what happened there?
Yeah. So Minneapolis, I think, really is a good lesson for all of us in remembering that organizing your forces is so important. So Minneapolis activists on the ground and organizers on the ground really, they built these systems where people would have ways to report when they saw ICE on their block, for example. So you could say, ICE has been spotted at this block in this city. That would go to a network of people whose job it was to make sure that then the information got to the people who would go and walk down the street to make sure that anybody who was walking their child home from school or something wouldn't be harassed. Or, make sure it was very clear that this is an ICE truck, because of course they come in just rental cars. So you have to have seen them getting in the car to know that that's an ICE car, that kind of thing. It also, they were able to organize things like grocery delivery or rent payments for people who maybe work a day wage job because they are not documented. So they maybe clean a house or work construction or things like that, but they couldn't go to work because they were afraid they would be kidnapped by ICE on the way to work. But if you don't go to work and you're working for cash in hand every day, how do you buy food for your children? How do you pay your rent? So being able to organize ways to make sure that folks were taken care of, that everybody had food, that everybody had as much possible amount of their needs met, so that they didn't have to have confrontations at all. And then organized people on the legal side, being ready to do legal defense, being ready to bring city council resolutions, being ready to not let a single city councilor sleep until they passed some laws or some protections. Our DSA chapter worked very hard on a rent forgiveness piece of rent forgiveness legislation, so that if somebody couldn't pay their rent that month, it was just legally forgiven, as opposed to having to pay it, collect money to pay to a landlord. So connecting those legal fights with being on the streets and just helping people directly. So it's all these little pieces, and that's just really where we're organizing, and being able to organize people across differences and meet people's needs where they present themselves. It was really remarkable. It was really exciting to see, and helped provide a model. And there are other cities that have done really exciting work there too, Los Angeles, Chicago, and I think smaller cities. I think there's a high likelihood that ICE will be deployed to some smaller cities where the Trump administration thinks they can get away with it. I think people will be ready anywhere at this point.
But still, it is crazy, because
it's crazy.
Like what you described, that people are afraid of going to work, people are afraid to walk their kids to school, that people are afraid to go with their mother because they're working, they're there, they're contributing to the economy in the US, but they can be abducted, they can be kidnapped.
Disappeared.
That's rather dystopian. It's impossible to find a kind of language to do.
It's horrifying. Yeah. And it's, I said this earlier, but we built this system of militarization, and a machine will do what you design a machine to do. And that's what we built our economy around. So it's going to turn inward. I think was it Emil Cabral who said fascism is just colonialism turned inward, right? So that's what our machine was built to do. It was built to pillage. And so when we're short on targets to pillage, we'll just pillage ourselves. That's what it does. So yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised for the first time to have the military patrolling their American cities, the U.S. military. And that I am very, very glad that a lot of people took that surprise and channeled it into action to organize, to protect ourselves and each other.
It's interesting that you say that, because you're now in Europe. We're at the Congress of the European Left, and in Europe there's all this debate about now also Europe has to construct a military-industrial complex, and Europe has to militarize. It's also this right-wing discourse. But what you're saying is, if Europe shall construct that kind of military industrial complex. It's not going to be only used exterior. What would be your message to the Europeans coming from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only used to the interior, but people have this idea that it'll only be used against other type of people. So, even these sort of racists are surprised that it was 2 white people being shot in Minneapolis. My answer is, well, yes, of course. They're going to shoot anybody who stands in their way. That's what they do. It's what we built the machine to do. The machine does what it is built to do. I'm not here to give advice to the worst people on the planet, but if you are the worst person on the planet and you are listening to this podcast today, don't assume that they won't turn around and point it at you. There's always, making your cities crawl with a bunch of usually teenagers with guns, because I assume your military is also quite young, like our military. That is not going to result in anything good. I promise, ever. There's no good result of that. And if you build up your military capacity, that is what you're going to have to use in military capacity. You build an army and you got to do something with the army.
In that more theoretical debate, also a practical debate, is there a link between militarization and authoritarianism and extreme right? Would you put a link between these 3 concepts?
I certainly would, yeah. And I think that the less extreme right is also tied into that. The militarization is, again, it's this sort of cancer. It's metastasized throughout the body. If you build your economy around it, that is what your economy will be for. It's important that when we make these, social reforms, we don't do it so as to build up our capacity to do more military stuff. We want our children to be healthier and we want our children to be taken care of. We want them to do that so that they can thrive and live, not so that they can grow up to be strong soldiers. We want our children to study math and science because math and science are beautiful and they can they can heal diseases and they can create new ways of living that are unbelievable to us now, not so that they can grow up and design drones that shoot you. So when we're thinking about just the way we invest in our economy and the way we grow and support our people, we have to think about humanitarian reasons, not about militaristic reasons, because yes, all of that is combined. The military and the chauvinism and the right wing and the center right, this just whole system of building a fortress, because that's what the right's doing, right? They think of every country we live in as this fortress. They know we've destroyed the world. And so now they think our job is to build a castle. We're all going to live in a castle. And because all the other people are coming and all of the results of the things that we've started are going to come back to bite us. And that's not how we want or need to live. We're one big humanity, and we can work together to solve crises and to build a better future, one where everybody can thrive.
The person Trump, okay. But when there was an election, there was the promise from Trump to end the endless wars. And I think from a European perspective, it's not so clear why it was so important for people in the US to make that promise, to end the wars. There was also the promise to make life cheaper. And there was a promise to bring back industrial jobs. And if I'm well informed, these 3 promises were also very important to win some working class people towards the Trump campaign. Now we are more than 1 year after Trump the second, but on these 3 things he does not deliver.
Of course not. I mean, you can spend some time with any of the playbooks of any of the great fascists of history, and they all kind of do the same thing, right? They reach out. We're the party of the working man. We're here to fight for your right to have, your whatever, your culture as a working person, which is so funny to me, of course, right? They're mythologizing this life. I'm like, I just literally live that life. I live in a house in the middle of nowhere. I grow grapes. It's like, it's not, you can just do it. Nobody's stopping you. If you want to have a truck, you can buy a truck. Nobody cares. But yeah, that sort of mythology of a lifestyle that is fully accessible to anybody who wants it. But they have to make some promises in order to say that that's going to happen. But I think I think they've been doing the same. I think Mussolini did these promises. I think it's the same thing. But yeah, life being cheaper, it is not. I think the endless wars thing, I think that ties into this idea that we're building these fortresses. Each of our countries is a fortress. We're not going to do other wars because we're just going to protect our fortress. Of course, that's not true. It's a lie because, again, we built a machine and the machine's going to do what it does. And then industrial jobs. I think Trump really leaned hard into the idea of tariffs, and I think part of the reason it was so successful is because I think people still don't know what it means at all. I mean, I barely know what it means. It's funny because he's quite chaotic, but occasionally he'll hit on some messaging point and he'll just hammer it home and hammer it home. And he really did that with tariffs, and I think people thought, I don't know, Donald Trump's a millionaire. He probably knows better than me about how money works. Of course, tariffs have nothing to do with industrial jobs. The US is heavily deindustrialized. It is true. People are right they're right that their grandparents lived in the same town and had job opportunities and were able to get a good union job in their town pretty much anywhere. And they're right that those jobs are gone. My grandmother worked in a typewriter factory. So if Trump's bringing back typewriters, maybe my town will really come back to life. But other than that, I don't know.
It's data center that he's bringing.
Yeah.
What is the problem with data center?
Yeah. So that's such an interesting thing. And we're seeing it happen. And a lot of our DSA chapters across the country are fighting against these because I will confess that I do not fully understand the technology of what these things are. But my sense is that it's these large computer rooms where you have a bunch of machines that hold a bunch of data on them. But those require a great deal of electricity, water for cooling. But what they don't require is a lot of people to work on them. They often just take one or two people whose job it is to make sure that the lights stay on. And then if they need more advanced technicians, they fly them in. And fly them out. So what ends up happening is it causes strain on the town's electrical grid. It causes strain on the town's water supply. So people's electricity prices go up, which electricity prices are already quite high because of energy prices in general. Your water prices go up. I mean, clean water is one of the things that is generally quite available in the US. Our water supply is generally quite good. There are a few cities that have some real problems, but do you all understand that this is a rare public service that's mostly working in most places? And I don't think people do, and I think they hear data centers and they don't really understand tech, and they just hear, that sounds like a good job. That sounds like a good job for my kid. Maybe my kid won't move away. Maybe I'll get to see my grandchildren. The pain of people in deindustrialized towns is very real. They're right. It's correct to be mad that you can't have a job where you live. It's correct to be mad that you can't hope that you can't assume that your children will have a better life than you. That's a thing to be mad about. But what Trump's offering as the solution to that is that somehow this is the fault of immigrants or of queer people, when in reality it's extremely obviously the fault of the ultra wealthy and the capitalist class who just exploit and exploit and exploit. So, yeah, again, the fascist playbook, right? You identify a correct problem, but you give the absolute most terrible possible solution.
Those people who voted, who are living in New York State, and
Yes.
In the north, the former industrial belt also from the US, the people who voted for Trump because they really believed he was going to bring peace or making life cheaper or bring back industrial jobs. Mm-hmm. Now, some parts of these people seem okay, it doesn't deliver, but if one could believe the polls, it is not. He's gonna lose the midterm elections in November. Mm-hmm. So, what will happen? Is he gonna lose? Or shall he intervene in the elections? What's the playbook?
Yeah, good question. So my prediction, putting on my magic hat, I think probably the Senate will stay approximately the same, and the Democrats will pick up a few seats in the House, and I think the progressive wing will pick up several seats. The question will then become, in theory, the House of Representatives should be able to at least put up some roadblocks, some bumps in the road, some sand traps, whatever, to make Trump not be able to get through so easily. The question will be, will the Democrats have the courage to lead some of that? Because right now they're failing. There have been several war powers resolution votes. In the U.S. Constitution, only Congress has the ability to declare war. But of course, obviously, our presidents do it all the time. But Congress would have to say, no, you can't declare this war. We do it. So somebody brings a bill, usually some progressive brings a bill and says, let's vote on this war powers resolution and reclaim our power as Congress to declare war. And 4 Democrats voted against it last time it was in the House, and I think 7 Democrats voted against it, including Chuck Schumer last time it was in the Senate. Chuck Schumer is the Democratic Party leader in the Senate. So they're going to have to grow a spine and stand up to Trump a bit more strongly. And hopefully we can pressure them from the left to do that a bit, because pressure from the right seems to be something they cave to.
There is there was some noise also in Europe, but a strange situation happened with the Epstein files at one point. It was some noise, and there was all these documents that were leaked, and there was the names also from Trump and from Musk and from Scott Bessent and whoever who's now in government and in power, some way involved in the broader case of the Epstein files, and then it stopped somewhere. It's a rather crazy situation. How would you describe this Epstein files, and what does it learn? What does it not learn? What's your assessment on that?
Yeah, we had an interesting meeting with an activist who was from maybe a more left liberal kind of organization. And one of the questions she had for us was, so what are you all thinking about the Epstein files? And we said, well, duh. Like, yeah, of course, that is exactly how the billionaire class behaves. We've been telling everybody that billionaires have been bad for as long as we've been around. And she was a little bit taken. It was a very pleasant and funny conversation, but there is this sort of shock that's coming out of the center and it's center left that we just don't have. And we're like, of course. What did you think they did? Do you think they just play darts in the basement? No, they're the world's worst people. That is what they you know, when you accumulate wealth to that degree, it degenerates your brain somehow. So yeah, what to do about them? I mean, it was very interesting watching Trump go from pre-election saying, release the Epstein files, because even then I was like, aren't you in that? You're definitely in them. I feel like you're really in them. And why are you saying this? But then suddenly they start coming out, and then he's very good at finding a new shiny object to point everybody's attention at, right? Like a dog that's trying to get into dinner and you throw a ball so the dog runs across the room. He's very good at that. I don't know if it's him who's very good at it or his consultants or what, but they really threw some distractions, and
it's not Melania.
It's not Melania. No, she tried to seem. I know. You will not hear me say many kind of things about her, but she did seem to try to bring attention back to it. So yeah, again. This is one of those places where we really need the Democrats being the only real opposition, the only numerically substantial opposition, to have some spine. But of course, a lot of them are in the Epstein files.
Yeah, but still okay, because we're laughing now, but degenerated situation about this top political class, this wealthy, ultra wealthy layer of society, organizing sex parties on an island, being not punished, and it's still a crazy situation. Okay, of course we know that there is degeneration, etc., but it is a very disgusting.
Yeah, no, it's horrifying, and it's, you know, even like Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, whatever, you know, when the British royal family is pulling away titles, you know, some things were really bad. So yeah, you know, why isn't there any prosecution? Why isn't there any movement? I don't know. People are furious, but I think the Democrats not making some motion on this is really losing them a lot of their base.
I saw when the first, I think when Rene Good was murdered in Minneapolis, there was a nice communication, and it shocked me a lot, because the title of this ICE communication at that time was that ICE was sent to Minneapolis to get some illegal pedophiles out of the country. So it was the right-wing propaganda against illegal, pedophile, and all these buzzwords. Mm-hmm. But there was never a nice troop that set foot on the Epstein Island, right, where the real pedophiles were gathering with the money, etc.
Right.
And this double discourse, this double this double morality, it's
Yeah.
shocking. I am under the impression people know that. People
Yes.
know that there is a double standard.
Yes, absolutely. And I think some people are fine with it. Some people are perfectly happy to have double standards because really deep down what they don't like is immigrants and they don't want to have to say out loud that they don't like immigrants. So they'll layer it in 1,000 rounds of fake discourse. And that's a, not an insubstantial number of people. And I think you have a probably quite similar percentage of people who are just bigots, and that's just what they are. I believe that nobody's beyond redemption, but that's what they are right now. But yeah, the way it's the way that the hypocrisy is very real. I do think that there's a kind of knee-jerk, especially from our kind of left liberal pundit class, to really try to say, our Rachel Maddow class, that sort of media class, to say this is hypocritical, this is hypocritical, this is hypocritical, and it just never works because for some reason people don't really care. They know it's bad. I think there's something that happens to you when you are juggling these contradictory ideas in your head that sometimes you're just like, I give up. It's all crazy and I'm checking out. And I think we see a lot of apathy coming out of this because they just see too much doublespeak and lies and people have just had enough. So, but there's also a lot of really angry energy coming out of it, and finding ways to channel that energy into good organizing is our task.
Going to Iran, the question arises, what is the US doing in Iran?
Oh my God.
Because, for example, there is this theory that's saying, okay, he wanted to, after the completely illegal kidnapping of the Venezuelan president, which was completely illegal against all international law, but it went rather smoothly, and he called it a victory. And then there is a theory saying that Netanyahu convinced Trump to do the same thing in Iran, and it didn't work out. But what is the ultimate goal of Trump and the U.S. military? Because it looks like they're not winning at all.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal of Trump and the U.S. military is to do war, to make more war so that the military-industrial complex can make more money. And the machine just does what it does. That's how it functions. It doesn't know how to do things other than war. What the goal is, I mean, I assume they just want Middle East oil, but I think the goal, the war in itself is as much the goal as any product. And I really worry that we're going to see some sort of violence or invasion in Cuba very soon. And that's a great example of the machine just doing what it does. Because Cuba has its people. It doesn't have anything else. It has no resources. The ground is not particularly fertile anymore because so much sugarcane has been grown that there's no nutrients left in the soil. It has fish, but we already have plenty of seacoast. There's nothing in Cuba that we need to go get, but it's there, and I think that he has, English idiom, has some egg on his face from Iran. I think he's embarrassed, and I think in his mind, Cuba will be an easy victory. I think Cuba will be an incredibly difficult fight. I think one thing that the U.S. war machine does not seem to be able to learn is that when your opposition has ideological grounding that they're fighting for, it is very hard to fight. And you'd think Vietnam would have taught us that. You'd think watching the slaughter in Gaza would have taught us that. But it's a lesson that we don't seem to be able to learn. And I think, but I'm very worried for folks in Cuba right now, because I think he keeps hinting at it, and somehow in his head, I think he thinks Cuba is just this poor little island, and he'll just be able to swoop in, grab whatever, grab the president. I don't know, is that what we do now? And then it'll be ours again. And I guess we can put some casinos there, is what he thinks, like in the old days.
That's the more imperialistic view now. Before the U.S., after World War II, the Second World War, after 1945, they intervened in a lot of countries. They did some coups d'etats, etc. But now, mostly they did it with some language about human rights, democracy, etc. And now you have this U.S. president, and he says, we're going to grab the oil. and he's intervening in Venezuela, and he's stealing the oil, he's stealing the vessels of the oil, etc. And it's rather blunt, because one time he said also about Iran, maybe we can bomb, maybe we don't bomb. It's like playing with the future of millions of people and countries. It's saying the same thing, but is it now all in the open? It's without any justification, bluntly imperialist. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the sort of fascist direction we've been moving in, to just go full mask off. We're just a supervillain now.
And people in the U.S., because my understanding was, okay, like, war in itself is not a popular. Luckily, it's not a popular thing in the U.S.
Sure.
because soldiers coming back, maybe body bags are going back. And people are tired to see body bags coming back. And is there any resistance growing against these new wars from a president who was elected on a so-called peace program?
Yeah. There certainly is growing anti-war movement, and even just, I like I said, I don't actually know if I said this, but I turned 18 5 days before 9/11, so my whole adult life has just been 9/11 and on, and that's my villain origin story. And so I was college aged. I was not happy about the war. I went to a rally, I think. I never got organized, and it sort of went away. You see a much different anti-war movement now, one that is much more organized, one that is much more pointed, one that is much more focused on actual levers of power. How can we shut down imperialist businesses, military-industrial complex businesses? How can we make sure that there are primary challengers to soft Democrats who vote with the military? How can we make it, 10 years ago, if you had said about AIPAC, what...
AIPAC meaning?
Sorry, that's AIPAC is an Israeli, essentially an Israeli government lobby in the U.S., and it's a PAC, right? The PAC part. I think it's the American Israeli Political Action Committee. PAC is basically a fundraising apparatus, a fundraising project. So PACs are largely the way that corporations and very wealthy people funnel money into our political system. So it's the Israeli lobby, essentially. But if you had said AIPAC is evil, which is something that fairly mainstream Democrats are starting to say, you would have been, marched out of town as an anti-Semite you would never have had a political career again. And now it has become something that we can say because the Israeli government has become so, again, cartoonishly evil. And this idea that they're allowed to, AIPAC exists for the Israeli government to influence U.S. elections, and is the largest political action committee. They give more money to more politicians than anyone. So the way that has shifted, the way that you are now able to just say, like, this is war money, and it exists to grow the military-industrial complex, and I am against it, and that does not make me an anti-Semite, and it doesn't make me. And it is in many ways kind of neutral. It's just a fact. This money exists so that politicians will vote yes on war fund. That's a big change. And organized people, and are we strong enough to stop a war yet? No, but we can throw wrenches into the machine, and it's growing. And I think, I hope by the next one we can stop it before it starts. But in the meantime, we will do what we can to stop it after it started and help prevent the next thing.
Last question and last topic, going back to New York, of course, one of the topic points of 2026 all over the Europe and the US and broader is you got a socialist major in New York City, a member of your party, the DSA party. being a mayor of the symbol city of capitalism.
Yeah, it's Wall Street.
It's What is it? What is he doing? How is it going in New York?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Zoran Mamdani, he's been a DSA member for several years. He and is a real organizer with DSA. Really, you would call it a militant. We can't use that word, of course. It means something a little different in the U.S. Maybe cadre would maybe be what we would use. Militant implies that you're in a military, but we're not a military. Unfortunately, we did. Yeah. It makes us sound way cooler than we are. Yeah. Down with the military-industrial complex, up with the militant-industrial complex. So Zoran has been a party member for quite some time. Active organizer, did a lot of work on a project called I forget the name of the project. But essentially it was a project to organize the state of New York to divest from Israeli funds. Because our states and our local governments often have pension funds or state funds or something, they have to put them somewhere. And so instead of just putting them in a hat under your bed, they put it into stocks. And so the goal was to, not on our dime. That was what it was called, not on our dime. Which abbreviates to nude, which is very funny. Okay. So Zoran was a big organizer for that. He was in the state house, the New York State House, and then he wanted to run for mayor, and the local chapter said, yeah, let's do this, and it was a massive campaign. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people knocking millions of doors, talking to their neighbors, it's a funny thing, we talk about, this is really a core of the way we function. We do a lot of what we call canvassing or door knocking. We go out and we knock doors and we talk to our neighbors. New York City is not, it's sort of famously a city where people don't necessarily chat with each other, right? You're living in quite close quarters. People like their space. It's not, it's sort of a New York City joke. Like if somebody smiles at you, they must be a tourist. But it turns out New Yorkers, like everybody, are hungry for that connection and for somebody to listen to them and listen to what they are actually struggling with as the working class. And Zoran really did. He really connected with folks. And he came up with 3 main campaign things: fast and free buses. The New York City public transit system is quite decrepit, and this will make the buses go faster. It'll make them be free. Universal childcare, and was tax the rich the third one? No, there was a third. Whatever. Anyway, so the point was, he was
the housing question.
Oh, the housing. Yeah. We've got to cap the rent, right? Yeah. So freeze the rent. So and all of these things, he talked about taxing the rich to pay for them. That resonates with people because they see, especially when you're in New York City, it's right in front of your face. You see, you're walking to work at your low-income job, and there's a Prada store, and somebody's spending $40,000, and that's like how much it costs to send your kid to college for one semester. And the whole thing is, it's so in your face, the inequality. And, life's hard and the city's expensive and people still have to work there. And even the people who want to just buy huge amounts of Prada need somebody to, drive the bus and need somebody to keep the city running, pick up the trash. And those are, it's really important that the New York City have a strong, vibrant, well-supported working class. And ideally, which sort of get rid of everybody who's not them, but we can't make them all to move to Kansas yet. So in the meantime, we are able to to tax them more and to give the working class some benefits that they should have. And probably, I imagine to Europeans, some of these things sound even quite silly. I don't think Belgium has childcare, right? Free childcare.
Not free childcare, but public childcare, yes.
Okay.
They're trying to privatize it, but...
Of course. Don't let them privatize anything. Mm-hmm. That's my advice. The more you let them privatize, the more power you lose as a citizen. And this is a problem we have in U.S. politics. You can vote, and it just doesn't mean that much because the corporations run everything, because everything is privatized.
But that's just a question, Megan, because Dan Zoran becomes a mayor of New York, but some would say, okay, what would his powers be to correct some things? Because I don't think anyone expects that everything changes overnight. That's impossible.
Sure.
Everyone knows. But which space for maneuvering he has to change things on housing, on public transport, etc. That's still a question.
Yeah, and some of it is I think experimentation from him, from us, and from his support people. Some things that he can change have to be approved by the New York State legislature, which includes people from a bunch of different places, including where I live. Will they let him make some of the more radical changes? We'll see. And sometimes, he will try to make a radical change and they won't let him, but that will be radicalizing for people. And so there is still a win there because people will see this Democratic Socialist tried to fight for me and tried to get me whatever thing, some sort of healthcare or childcare or basic thing that I need. And maybe the city government or the state government didn't let him, but he tried. And finally, somebody tried and fought for me. And so even if some of the things aren't able to happen, having a real fighter for you in a very prominent office, I think it already has radicalized a lot of people. It already has made people believe that if we work together, politics can work for people, everyday people. Politics is us. Politics is just the polity. It's just the body. It's the people making decisions together. So we can convince people of that. It's going to take work, but it's not an impossible thing. And part of the joy of organizing is giving people that opportunity to feel that power of what it means to work with a bunch of other people. And when we join our forces together, we really are so much stronger. And then we win stuff, and then you have that freedom to, paint or draw or play video games or whatever fun thing it is you like to do and sort of live your thriving life. So, yeah, it's important. We've got a world to win.
This is nice words to end this podcast with hope and with organization with optimism, Megan.
I am nothing if not insufferably optimistic.
Thank you very much for being here, Megan.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to be here in Belgium and to get to see some of the workings of the PTB, PVDA.
Yeah, perfect. DSA, PVDA.
Exactly. We love letters.
Yeah.
Socialists love letters and combinations.
Merci.
Merci à vous.